Genoese galleys, who had protested the approach to battle, fled swiftly when the situation turned sour for the French.
100 Years War. So many people wanted me to do
Welcome
it.
back, history enthusiasts, to another
So many
exciting
people.
journey through the annals of time.
So many
Today
people.
we delve
Too many
into
people.
the epic and tumultuous saga known
I need to react to more like Eurocentric history. I've been doing a lot of Islam reactions. I need to take a break from that. I need more European audience.
as the 100 Years' War. This century-spanning conflict between the kingdoms of England and France was a clash filled with daring knights, cunning tactics, and epic battles that would shape the course of European history. The 100 Years' War can be divided into 3 distinct phases, each with its own unique character. The first phase, called Edwardian, featured the battles of Crécy and Poitiers, which saw the English longbowmen rise to prominence, wreaking havoc on the French forces with their deadly arrows, as the legends of Edward III and the Black Prince emerged. The second Carolinian phase started with a balance between the two sides, and soon spilled into Spain and beyond, immortalizing John of Gaunt and Bertrand de Guesclin, as well as the English chevauchés and the French professional troops with the battles of Cocherel and Port-Villon. The third Lancastrian phase started with a devastating English victory at Agincourt by King Henry V. A civil war within France between the Burgundians and the Armagnacs began, but the country was saved by the famous heroine Joan of Arc, who turned the tide at Orleans, allowing Prince Charles to regain the throne, and then win the war with the battles of Patay, Formigny and Castillon, marking the end of this epic conflict and the reclamation of French territories. We're going to talk about all of this in this video, so buckle up for an exhilarating ride through history as we explore the 100 Years' War, its main battles, and incredible stories of various characters that make it one of the most epic chapters in the Chronicle of Warfare. Let's embark on this journey together and relive the battles and legends of the past. It's a mission also taken up when it comes to conflict.
Skip.
When Duke of Normandy conquered England in 1066, his status as a vassal of France's Capetian kings gave rise to a paradoxical situation in Western Europe. The monarchs of England now held ancestral territories on the continent as a vassal of the French kings, while also being rulers of a strong realm. Sometimes they controlled even larger territories in France than their overlords, a trend which reached its zenith between 1154 and 1204, when the Angevins ruled more than half of the country. This didn't last for too long, however, as a succession of strong French kings, beginning with Philippe II Augustus, gradually conquered more territory, and by 1224, all English possessions on the continent, save for Gascony in the southwest. This narrow strip of maritime territory had grown prosperous under English rule and developed into an important source of royal income through the wine trade, often raising more in annual revenue than England itself. Gascony's population valued the connection it had with the island monarchy, and were not French as we know the French in our time. The duchy's language in the Middle Ages was a separate Gascon tongue, and its people had little to no ties with the people of northern France or its Capetian monarchy.
Yeah, I know that Europe has a bunch of tongues/languages that, bro, it's so much. I didn't realize how much like Europe has. Like, I only can remember like Basque, Octavian, Aquitaine, or whatever the heck that language is called. Then there's so much. It's just too much. But yeah, it's quite interesting. I would definitely I never met anyone who could, like, no, I met one person. She spoke Catalan, but that was it. I haven't met anyone who could speak like a sub language that isn't like mainstream in Europe. Aside from, I don't know, maybe like no, I haven't even met anyone like that either. The point is, it's just quite interesting. If you can speak one of these many languages that aren't like a main language, tell me. That's quite cool.
Contemporary author Jean Froissart goes so far as to call the inhabitants the English. In 1259, King Henry III was forced to sign the Treaty of Paris. in which he renounced his claims on most continental lands, but was confirmed in his status as overlord of Gascony, but only as a vassal of the French kings, to whom he was obliged to pay homage. This is widely thought to be one of the factors which made the 100 Years' War inevitable. Despite the peace, a number of dynastic and territorial wars over the next half-century ratcheted up the tension between England and France even more, giving both sides experience in raising armies and waging war. This state of affairs probably would have continued for a long time, but on January 31st, 1328, Charles IV, the last king of the main branch of the Capetian dynasty, died without a male heir and left his kingdom in a dynastic crisis. Despite the fact that the English king, Edward III Plantagenet, was a nephew of the dead king, the French lords decided that his cousin, Philippe of Valois, which was the cadet branch of the Capetian dynasty, would inherit the throne. To justify it, they cited the ancient Salic law which prevented women from inheriting any land, a ruling which affected Edward because he was related to Charles IV through his mother Isabella. Edward at the time was young, and England was under the control of Isabella and her lover, Roger Mortimer. So in 1329...
Look at my boy, Roger. Look at him. High cheekbones, strong jawline. Oh my gosh, it's so cliche. No wonder why she was letting him screw her.
He paid
homage. Wait, did I say that properly? No wonder why she was letting him... Yeah. You get the point.
The Sixth. A year later, the now majority-age Edward and his supporters slew the despised Roger Mortimer and exiled Isabella to Norfolk.
Oh no! Not the Giga Chad.
To assume control of his kingdom. The newly minted English king marched north in 1333 and crushed France's Scottish allies at Halidon Hill, leaving David II to seek refuge in Paris at his allies' invitation, who then announced that any future talks must take Scotland's interests into account. Edward was not amused, and thereafter considered the...
You know, I actually honestly forgot that Scotland and the UK... Not Scotland, Scotland and the French were quite good buddies just because they both hated the English. Oh my goodness. It's funny because I don't know. I've seen like some Scottish people who like being a part of the UK, and then I see Scottish people who don't like being a part of the UK. I don't know, to be honest. I feel like, I think Scotland should stay for economic reasons, but I don't know how I should feel. The way how the UK is going right now, I don't know, man. The UK is just going south right now. It's just like bad. It's just so bad.
Nominal overlord, an adversary. This is probably what led England's king to grant the fugitive French count Robert d'Artois refuge in 1336. He had been found guilty of poisoning his aunt in a dispute over the inheritance of the eponymous county of Artois, condemned to death and then chased out of France. Robert arrived in London and him an earldom, a few castles and...
I was gonna say, Calais, I watched a video the other day between where someone was flying from Calais to what was it, Dover, I think? Was it Dover? Calais to the other point, and it showed like they were in the air and they looked outside the window and you could literally see just how close Calais, how close France and England truly was, which is wild. Like, holy crap, I didn't even realize it was like that close. I do know it's only like 20 miles apart, which is not that, like, come on, 20 miles there. 20 miles, like, sometimes it feels like England is an island, but then you realize that England is a lot more closer to Europe than you'd think.
Stipends, despite the fact that Philip VI had declared himself a foe of any who harbored the criminal. When Philippe sent a demand to Edward through the Seneschal of Aquitaine, ordering his vassal to surrender Artois, the demand was rejected and both parties began preparations for war.
If you're out in a...
Since Robert was actually in England, where Philippe VI technically had no jurisdiction over Edward, rather than in French territory, the order was viewed to have no legal legitimacy, which further displayed the king-vassal paradox created by the Norman conquest of England. All of these tensions came to a head on May 24, 1337. On that day, Philippe declared that Aquitaine no longer belonged to Edward because of the many excesses, rebellious and disobedient acts committed by the King of England and against us and our royal majesty, in particular citing his granting of haven to Robert Artois. The king then called his feudal lords to summon to war, the so-called arrière-ban, and this is widely seen as the beginning of the 100 Years' War, despite the lack of actual declaration. Instead, it was the culmination of many growing tensions, such as the gradual centralization of government, the unworkable nature of the Plantagenets' vassal status, and other factors. The conflict began on two fronts almost immediately, as the French began raiding an under-garrisoned Gascony. While that was happening in the south, a cash-strapped Edward III crossed the Channel into Flanders, England's closest commercial partner through the lucrative wool trade, and purchased the Holy Roman Emperor Ludwig IV's allegiance, but didn't gain too much benefit from the expense. Even after being
money, as the world goes around,
forced to sell the royal crown of England off for funds, Edward launched a campaign into France with around 12,000 troops, and eventually faced off against Philippe and his army, who outnumbered him 2-1 at Flamangerie in October.
That's not that to the
standoff, Edward retreated back into friendly territory, and Philippe didn't pursue him.
Bruh, I can't say the word, bruh. Damn it, I can't swear. I want to say something, but I cannot swear. Wow. I don't know how to describe this without not swearing.
It was brief. The 1339 campaign was nightmarish for the local populations in Edward's wake.
Oh, I bet.
Medieval military strategy was to inflict as much carnage against hostile cities and agriculture as possible, which would weaken the enemy government, economy, and ultimately hamstring its ability to wage war. The English king had seen the effectiveness of such tactics, especially in rich and densely populated lands such as those in northern France, and so the notorious chevauchée was born. While not yet fully developed, these chevauchées were low-cost raids, using limited resources, with the deliberate aim of systematically devastating and lowering the productivity of territories through which the raiders marched, all the while enriching the invader and weakening the allegiance between the conquered and their king. As the 100 Years' War progressed, the utility of this strategy was to prove itself indisposable. By the time 1340 began though, Edward's campaign had left the king even more monetarily destitute than ever, but this didn't stop him from formally proclaiming himself King of England and France in Ghent during January of that year.
Boldness!
The situation in the Channel wasn't going in Edward's favour. Ever since 1336, English coastal towns had continuously fallen victim to seaborne raids from French attacks, while the Plantagenets—
oh my gosh, bro. The French rule the waves. That's so weird to say. That is so freaking weird to say. The French rule the waves. I know. At this point, England was more or less a backwater kingdom, quite frankly speaking. So backwater, in fact, that I'm aware that most English kings for a long time, actually, no, most English kings up until the 100 Years' War at this point cared about France more than actually England. Oh my goodness, but still, man, the French rule the waves, bro. I'm sorry. My humor can just be. It's just funny to me. It's just so funny to me.
King's own captains often managed to retaliate with equal rapacity. Philippe VI had the larger navy, and there was a real possibility of England being invaded. Edward.
Oh my goodness! No way! Everyone's dream, invading England. Oh, the French have a bigger navy than the English, bro. Oh my goodness gracious me. That is so weird to think about. It genuinely is. Oh my gosh.
2 months after his coronation in Flanders. The fact that he owed money to prominent creditors in the area also provided adequate reason to get off the continent.
Nah, bro is running from death.
After making landfall, the king raised a new tax and immediately began assembling new forces for the war. Reinforcements and ships, mainly converted merchant vessels known as cogs, were assembled at Orwell in Suffolk, ready for the attack. The French fleet, which had wreaked havoc upon the English shores with Castilian and Genoese support, had suffered heavy losses in a surprise attack and could no longer organize raids on the English coast, so they instead limited themselves to defend their shores. To help in this endeavor, Philippe ordered the creation of an armada and had it sent to Sluys, the most critical port in Flanders, to cut off Edward from his mainland allies. When his fleet was ready, the English king announced, against the advice of many of his close officials, that he would attack France's 200-vessel-strong armada, which was anchored in modern-day Belgium, and destroy it. In defiance of those members of his entourage who decried the foolhardy naval assault, Edward III proclaimed, "I shall cross the sea, and those who are afraid may stay at home." He set sail on June 22, 1340, and reached the outskirts of the estuary of the Zwin River in the afternoon of the following day. The French fleet anchored outside Sluys comprised 6 Genoese galleys, 22 ore barges, 7 royal sailing ships, 167 merchant ships, and 11 Spanish and Flemish allies, for a total of 212 vessels manned by 19,000 sailors, 500 crossbowmen, and 150 men-at-arms. It was commanded by 2 knights, Nicolas Beauchet and Hugh Quiré, without naval experience. The English fleet was composed of 3 warships and around 120 to 160 cogs, but had more men trained in the art of war. Exact numbers are unknown.
That doesn't sound too awful. I mean, guys, I reacted to a lot of battles at this point, and yes, numbers can play a pivotal role, but it's like, due to the fact that they have like such big ships all cluttered together, it's like all those ships can't be in play, right? All those ships cannot be in play, so it's like it kind of negates the whole number thing. I mean, yes, as you lose more and more ships, yeah, it's better because you just have more reserves. But if the enemy is more skilled, then yeah, you have a serious problem.
But high estimates put the combatants at 4,000 men-at-arms and 12,000 archers. The French fleet was drawn up in 3 lines across the mouth of the Zwin, with the biggest vessels in the first line, though their tight formation came at a cost in maneuverability. Edward's spies had informed him of the French formation, describing it as like a great wood. The king decided to attack in the early afternoon of the following day, the 24th. With the tide and winds in their favour, and the Sarn at their back, the English fleet advanced in 3 rows, with the bigger ships in the front, having 1 vessel filled with men-at-arms for every 2 hosting longbowmen. The French ships, already in a tight spot.
The English longbowmen were, yeah, I can see where this is gonna go if that's the case.
Had drifted eastwards while anchored.
I thought the longbowmen came like later on. Oh wow.
Even more space for maneuvering, so they could not use their second line. As the 2 front lines crashed into each other at 3 p.m., the English longbowmen rained arrows from a distance upon their adversaries from towers and crow's nests purposely built on the trade cogs. standing on a lower level, sun in their eyes, and armed with slower shooting, less accurate crossbows, the French shooters couldn't do anything and were riddled with arrows or jumped overboard to escape the mayhem.
I knew it!
Once the ship was weakened, it would be entangled with hooks and swarmed by English soldiers, making short work of the defenders and capturing the ship. Among which were the Christopher and the Edward, two English.
Oh nah, bro. This is broken. How do you beat this? How do you? Oh come on, nah, bro. This is too broken.
Royal vessels recently taken by the French. The Genoese galleys, who had protested the approach to battle, fled swiftly when the situation turned sour for the French.
Oh my goodness! They just abandoned them. Oh man, that's too hilarious.
After 4 hours of fighting, the French front line had sunk or been captured, and the English advanced upon the smaller vessels of the second line, gaining an even more significant advantage. At the same time, many Flemish boats set sail from local ports and attacked the French lines from behind. It was a complete disaster for the Valois fleet. By nightfall, the battle ended. The French had lost 190 vessels, either to the English or to the sea.
Wow!
With only 23 managing to escape at night.
90%.
A quarter was given to the captives, and many Frenchmen drowned or were killed by the locals on the shore. The loss of life was between 16,000 and 18,000 men, and it is said that only Philippe VI's jester dared to inform him of the disaster. The English lost only a few ships, but the loss of men was quite substantial. The English victory was crushing for French morale. The French army had campaigned in the Scheldt Valley in early 1340 against the Count of Hainaut and Flemish rebels, and now had to move to Arras to cover the entrances to the French kingdom. Edward decided to attack northern France in a two-pronged attack with his Flemish and Imperial allies. The king would lead the bigger contingent to Tournai and besiege it. Meanwhile, a second army, placed under the command of Robert d'Artois, would be sent to Saint-Omer, as it was believed he still had many allies in the region. D'Artois arrived near Saint-Omer on the 16th of July, but he had been preceded the previous day by Eudes, Duke of Burgundy, and Count of Arras. The Duke reinforced the town, and would be followed a few days later by the Count of Armagnac, bringing the number of defenders to 3,000 men-at-arms and a few thousand militia. Robert d'Artois was accompanied by 1,000 longbowmen, 10 to 15,000 poorly equipped Flemings, and a few hundred men-at-arms, who razed the town of Arques and made camp there. By the 26th, Robert knew that the main French army was approaching, so he offered battle to the garrison, hoping to draw them out. He placed himself on the right wing, with the archers behind him, while the centre and left flank were manned by Flemish soldiers from minor towns of southern Flanders, with a contingent in reserve. In front of them, he ordered hidden obstacles to be built against cavalry charges. The Duke of Burgundy had ordered to stay behind the walls, as he knew the king would soon arrive. But after a few hours, a contingent of eager knights, with part of the garrison, sortied out and attacked the Flemish left flank. The French were swiftly repulsed, partly thanks to the defensive positions, but once the Flemish began to pursue them, they regrouped and charged again, beginning a vicious melee that lasted all afternoon. Seeing this, the Duke of Burgundy and the Count of Armagnac decided to join the fray, and they burst out of the gates. The Count and his retinue of 300 heavily armoured knights smashed into the Flemish left side, decisively cutting them to pieces.
Ooh, what the heck? What? Come on! I'm like looking at this, watching. Like, what are the English not going to do something?
The second line began to flee back to the camp and was pursued and cut down, with around 8,000 perishing.
Woo!
Meanwhile,
England off to a bad start.
The Duke of Burgundy approached the right flank, where the English were positioned. Seeing their approach, Robert d'Artois ordered a charge against the Burgundians, who were surprised. After the initial contact, the French men-at-arms were forced to fall back to the safety of their walls, where the garrison could support them, but the Duke suffered heavy losses.
Oh yeah.
Camp at nightfall after their victory, the English crossed paths with the jubilant French, who had just pillaged the enemy camp. It was dark, and both sides were too tired to continue fighting, so they just passed each other, where a surprised Robert d'Artois could attest to the massacre and loss of the camp.
What? What? Wait. Bro, holy crap, bro, war can be so interesting sometimes. They just walk past each other. Bro, imagine, I can't say that word. Imagine unaliving a whole bunch of people. And then you're just walking past them because you're just too tired. Oh, yeah, bro, that guy, bro, he just like ripped a sword through my mate there just now, man. We were great friends, but I'm too tired. Like, bro, come on, bro. I cannot be the only one who find this stuff hilarious, bro. I cannot. Just walking. Okay.
The day after, he had to follow his fleeing allies and return to Edward in good order. Following the battle at Saint-Omer, the French army slowly approached Tournai and encamped at Beauvais by the start of September. Edward and his allies had besieged the town of Tournai from the 23rd of July, battering the walls with siege equipment, assaulting the walls, and raiding the countryside. But the town stood firm. With his enemies in the vicinity, but strapped for cash, Edward wanted to confront his enemy, but his allies were less keen. After some weeks of negotiation, the siege was lifted by the 24th, and the Truce of Eplechamp was signed. In England, Edward was confronted by his many creditors and lashed out at his tax collectors and ministers. At this
No matter what you do, you can never escape from debt.
point, the 100 Years' War transformed into a proxy war, when Duke John III of Brittany died in April of 1341. In the previous year, the old childless duke had promised the duchy to his half-brother John of Montfort and the French noble Charles of Blois, married to his niece Jeanne de Penthièvre. Thus, Charles and John claimed the throne when he passed away, making the ensuing civil war inevitable. Montfort made the first move and entered the capital of Nantes in May 1341, taking possession of the ducal treasury. He then took control of the eastern part of the duchy, while the central and northern regions were ruled by great feudal nobles and were out of his reach. Generally, the duchy's merchants and peasantry largely supported John, while the higher nobility sided with Charles. The garrisons of the Breton towns were confused about the situation and did not know what to do. Some opened their gates while others resisted. By the end of the summer, Montfort was in control of much of the duchy. The French king was, in the beginning, uncertain about what to do, more preoccupied with preparing for the impending end of the truce with the English, which would be extended for another year. Still, rumours that John of Montfort would pay homage to the English king pushed him to have the Parisian parliament declare the duchy in favour of Charles of Blois. He prepared for an invasion of Brittany, thus pushing Montfort further into English hands, though no help materialised that year. In autumn 1341, a strong French army gathered in the Loire Valley and advanced towards Champtocé, laying siege to it. Montfort rode out with his retinue to relieve the city, but after 2 days of bloodshed, the Breton noblemen had to retreat. After capturing Champtocé, the French army advanced down the valley until they reached the Breton capital of Nantes, where a short siege ensued. Still, once the citizens threatened to rebel, Montfort had to surrender himself to his adversaries, who imprisoned him after failed negotiations. Charles of Blois would then occupy most of the eastern half of the duchy, with many of Montfort's old supporters flocking over to him. Jeanne of Flanders, Montfort's wife, took control of her husband's party and treasury and retreated to Finistère, where she waited for English reinforcement in the spring of 1342. For Edward, this was a great opportunity. As well as opening up another front against Philip VI, Edward's geopolitical interests were served by getting involved. English trade, reinforcement and communication routes by sea to Aquitaine went around the coast of Brittany, and a hostile ruler in the duchy might sever those vital connections. However, Edward had difficulties amassing the fleet needed to transport his troops, so real help only materialized in August 1342. By this point, Charles of Blois had besieged the towns on the southern coast of Brittany and was encircling Brest, but the arrival from England of the Earl of Northampton and Robert of Artois broke the siege. Northampton then advanced out of Brest and besieged Morlaix, where a relief force under Blois arrived. On the 30th of September, on the outskirts of Morlaix, the French cavalry charged twice against the English positions covered by forest, pike traps and ditches, taking heavy casualties. While Blois' attempt was unsuccessful, the siege dragged to a standstill. In November,
Bro, this is so slow. This is so freaking. No, I know. We got like literally so much more left, but this is a very slow start to the 100 Years of War. I really and truly expected it to be much more fiery. I mean, it kind of was with the naval battle, but ever since then, it's kind of just like, not really going anywhere. I really expected to see more from Gascony because, you know, it's literally right bordering France.
King Edward arrived in Brittany and besieged Vaughan unsuccessfully, while many raids were launched in other areas of Brittany, causing devastation and ruining French morale. In December, a French royal army counterattacked, reaching the English army encamped at Ploermel. Here, papal envoys negotiated a 3-year truce, and the English king returned to his kingdom in January 1343. Pope Clement VI tried to end hostilities by mediating a peace conference at Avignon the year after.
Oh, that's so cute.
Still, neither
the Pope is trying to do something.
side would agree to the terms put forward by the other, and the war continued unabated. In fact, the war in Brittany continued, as Charles of Blois considered the civil war for the duchy as a personal war between himself and Montfort, and not a matter between England and France.
Wow.
During late
Wait. We're 24 minutes in right now? Oh my gosh.
1343, English partisans took control of Vaughan and Redon, but Blois traversed southern Brittany the following year and captured the vital town of Quimper. This conquest, the many Montfortist casualties, and the complete inaction of John of Montfort, who hoped to return to the good graces of the French king, collapsed the pro-English party, with many fleeing to the Count of Blois. Edward's men could only hold on to Vaughan, Brest and Hennebon.
Freaking hell. Let me see here. Right, 25 minutes. Alright, I try to keep these videos at least 30 minutes long, so I'm gonna leave it off here. If you like my reactions, right, you made it all the way to the end of this video, go and subscribe. Come on, go check out my other reactions. If you have any other suggestions that you want me to do, go and suggest it to me. And make sure to like the video, make sure it stays on the YouTube algorithm. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I look forward to this series a lot though.